Afternoon. I'm going to break protocol just a little bit and acknowledge Alma Powell, Michael and Jane Powell, Linda Powell, Anne Marie, and Francis Lyons and the grandchildren. We're here for your father, your husband, your granddaddy, and quite a turnout it is. If I may, President Biden, Dr. Biden, thank you very much for your attendance, particularly after the arduous trip. President Obama, Mrs. Obama, thank you so much for being here, and thank you for leading our nation for 8 years with wit, wisdom, and dignity. And President and Mrs. Bush, thank you so much for being here. You led our nation through the horror of 9/11, did not let us take counsel of our fears, and brought us out the other side on this war on terror. Thank you. And Mrs. Clinton, so what do I say? Do I say First Lady? Or do I say Secretary Clinton? Or Senator Clinton? I think I'll just content myself by saying we thank you for your years of service to our nation, and you know of Colin's affection for you. Eleanor Roosevelt wrote, "If at the end one can say, this man used to the limit the powers that God granted him. He was worthy of love and respect and of the sacrifices of many people, made in order that he might achieve what he deemed to be his task. Then that life has been lived well, and there are no regrets." And does that sound like somebody you know? Seems like the husband, the father, and the grandfather of the Powell family right here. People ask me, how did you develop a 40-year friendship with Secretary Powell, General Powell? Well, then it was Colonel Powell. Well, you have two disgruntled, multi-tour combat vets who are not happy with the way we conducted the war and certainly not happy with the way we left. I'm delighted to be part of a new administration which was coming in to develop not only the weapon systems we needed, but redevelop the morale that our nation needed so much. So that was a natural bonding thing. One day I asked General Powell, I think he was a major general at the time, I said, what's the secret to leadership? How do you know a good leader? He says, well, you know, you can see some people and they look great. They look strack in the uniform. But the fact of the matter is that they can't lead a horse to water. There are other people who look like an unmade bed, and yet they can lead people anywhere. And he said the trait, I guess, you'd want to see in a leader is someone whose troops would follow him or her anywhere. Anywhere. But if only out of curiosity, and somebody who would follow him and her just to see where the heck he's going. I asked General Powell one day, what did he learn in the Army? What's the most important thing he learned? He said, well, the most important thing he learned was in ROTC when he learned about the first general order, which cautions a sentry to take charge of this post, all government property in sight, and stand this post until properly relieved. But in his interpretation, that didn't mean you stood at the PX, which was warm, a lot of friendly faces going by. Yeah, you did that. That was part of your duty. But how about the motor pool? And how about the repair shops? They're part of your duty, too. You don't get to pick and choose what you like better. And he extended it to people. He would say, I extend the first general order to people. So we're all human. Some people we like better than others. But if you're in charge, you can't show it. And Colin would always end that comment by saying, we all need to treat everyone with a little bit more kindness than we think they deserve because we don't know what's going on in their lives. You know, I'm going to quickly throw out 3 anecdotes for you. This is a celebration. It's a celebration of a life. And I want to kind of fill that picture of Colin Powell out a little bit. And I'm going to try to tie together his sense of humor, his insatiable curiosity, and his comfort in his own skin. One day I was upstairs in the Pentagon, 2 floors above then Chairman Powell, And he buzzed me and asked, "Can I come down?" "Sure, I'll be right down." So I rolled down the 2 flights of stairs into his office. Nancy Hughes, who was at the door, she said, "Go right on in. They're expecting you." Well, I wasn't expecting them, but I went on in, and there was a boom box playing. There was a circle of very tall gentlemen that also included General Powell. It was the Harlem Globetrotters, and the boom box was playing Sweet Georgia Brown, and they were passing the ball around. And I'm not unfamiliar with a basketball court back when I could really walk. I wouldn't say run, but really walk. So they asked me to join the circle. I did. But every time one of the Globetrotters would pass the ball to Secretary Powell, he'd fumble it. He'd drop it. It would fall to the floor. So finally, one of the Globetrotters switched off the boom box and said, "Bro P, what's up with you? We throw you the ball and you drop it." And without a grin, without a grimace, he looked straight at that Globetrotter and said, "Well, you were out shooting hoops. I was stealing hubcaps." Globetrotter said that was all right, flicked the box back on, and it was Sweet Georgia Brown time again. I said he had an insatiable curiosity. Nothing made Secretary Powell happier than to sneak away from his security detail. Does that sound familiar to anyone here? And when he'd do it in the State Department, it would generally be followed by a call to me on the cell saying, "I'm free. I broke out." And then he'd tell me where he was, because it wouldn't be long before security would be going crazy. Well, this day found him down in the parking lot of the State Department, which is a huge underground parking lot. And he walked up to an attendant who, by the way, I'm not sure knew that this was the Secretary of State. And the Secretary said, "I've always wondered something. How do you figure out who gets in the front row or the second row, which means you can egress roughly on the time you thought you were going to egress, and who gets in the back row, because that'll take you 40 minutes. I said, "It's very easy." He said, "People come in and say, 'Good morning,' or 'It's snowing out there,' or 'Traffic is bad today.' We put them in the front row, the second row. If they come in with a window wound up, won't look right or left, just right on past, 40 minutes, and then they can get out. They'll be in the back row." This nugget was so enlightening to Secretary Powell that he made bold to ask about certain members of the hierarchy in the State Department. You'll have to guess. I'm not going to tell you who. The majority of them got through with first and second row, but a couple actually ended up time and again in the back row. Well, the third anecdote that I was going to say had to do with Secretary Powell, General Powell, Colin, CP, however you knew him, as Secretary of State. And visiting foreign minister from Sweden, Anna Lindh, was in. So she came in with her entourage, so the secretaries were very well appointed office. And she knew of Secretary Powell's affection for ABBA, and she knew of Secretary Powell's affection for Volvos. So she opened up a full CD set of ABBA and presented it to him. Colin immediately went down on one knee and sang the entire Mamma Mia to a very amused foreign minister from Sweden and to a gobsmacked U.S. delegation who had never seen anything like it. Well, our tastes in music were not very similar, except for one, Colin's and mine, except for one. Every Saturday afternoon at 5 o'clock, we would listen to WPFW in Washington. This is Pacifica Radio. This is People's Radio. Don't tell anybody who investigates us for security clearances, because this is Liberation Radio, if you will. There was a show at 5 o'clock in the afternoon hosted by Mr. Von Martin, and it's called Caribbeana. And that's one thing the two of us really like, whether it's Bob Marley and the Wailers, and we'll hear more about that later, Iggy Marley, the Swallow, any number of people. So we really had great, that one music taste. Colin loved the church. He loved the ceremony. He loved the liturgy. He loved the high hymns. This made him extremely happy. And as poor Alma knows, every day at 7 or 7:05. I would call him or he'd call me. We'd get our days ready, except on Sunday. On Sunday, I'd call at 9:30, and he would answer the same way every Sunday. He said, "Oh, yes, I was at church, and I want you to know I'm in the state of grace." And I would answer the same way every Sunday. Home, if you're not in the state of grace, who among us is? And that was every day for almost 40 years, the same opening remarks. Well, I grew up in the South, and my taste in hymns is a little different from Secretary Powell's. And my favorite hymn is one by the Reverend F.C. Barnes. He sings it with his wife, and it's called "Coming Up on the Rough Side of the Mountain." It's got 3 verses and 2 choruses. I'm just going to submit you to the 3rd verse. This old race will soon be over. There'll be no more race to run. And I will stand before God's throne. All my heartaches will be gone. And I'll hear my Savior say, "Welcome home." Be real quiet. Listen real carefully. And you might hear our Savior say, "Colin, welcome home, and here's your starry crown." And finally, it's a message to Alma and the kids. He's a very busy father, very busy husband, huge responsibilities. As I say, I've talked to him once, sometimes 15 times a day for 40 years. Never in 40 years do I recall his ever failing to either start or end his day by telling what Alma was doing, what Michael and Jane were doing, what Linda was doing, what Anne Marie and Francis were doing, what the grandkids were doing. And the reason I mention this is because I think as a husband, as a father, as a friend, I don't think we share often enough how we really feel with our family. Sometimes I think we take it for granted. But I want you to know that he didn't take it for granted. Every morning or evening, I heard about it. So God bless Colin, God bless the Powell family, and God bless us all. Thank you.